Hey everyone, Derek Hines here. Welcome to the podcast where I'll share with you the patterns, insights, research, and technologies that we use in my own pain and performance practice to help people improve their health, speed their healing, and increase their longevity. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast. Today on the show, we have Ashok Gupta, who is a chronic pain and illness specialist. And Ashok has such an interesting pathway of getting to this part. But on this show, you're going to hear how he started to look at chronic pain slightly differently and how he overcame his own chronic fatigue syndrome and started to look at the brain's role in illness and pain. You can expect to learn on today's show the role of the brain structures in pain and illness. So what does the brain actually do and how does it perpetuate some of these things? And what can we do about that? How can we use that knowledge to improve our own pain, our own illness, and potentially the risk of those things? So we also go into how to relax the nervous system and the importance of that. How can you actually retrain the brain and re-engage with joy? This was one of my favorite parts of this conversation, was getting to this last step of Ashok's program. He calls it the Gupta program, and it gets into how do we take people and guide people through this process to improve their quality of life. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's something that we don't talk about very much in terms of getting to the brain part and the process and the mental emotional part of illness and pain. So I think you'll get a lot out of this, and it'll kind of give you a few aha moments. So please enjoy this wonderful conversation with Ashok Gupta, just an incredible, passionate human being about improving the world's illness, improving pain and chronic pain issues through kind of spreading great education. So I hope you enjoy this one. Ashok Gupta, welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast, man.
Yeah, great to be here.
I am quite excited to dive into all of this stuff. I feel like a lot of the stuff that you're putting out there is a kind of breath of fresh air for a lot of people who have gone down the chronic pain, chronic illness pathway, and kind of gotten lost in the shuffle of looking for diagnosis and trying to find what's going on. And they've had all these treatments and everything seems to not quite work. And they're like, there's something missing. There's a missing piece. And I think a lot of the stuff that you're talking about for at least some of those people is the missing piece.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of people coming to us saying that they've been through a lot of the mainstream medical avenues, then they've tried quite a few alternative things, and certainly there are things that have helped. But as soon as they get stressed back, guess what? All of the symptoms come flooding back as well. And we believe that there's some underlying core reasons for that, and that's what we directly treat, is going to the root causes of these conditions.
I love it. I love it. Before we kind of get going too far, what I'd like to do is kind of take a little step back so people understand some context around this and go back to your time at Cambridge and some of the events that maybe led to your thoughts around this space and your discoveries on this space and your passion for it. So let's go, take us back to Cambridge and what was going on in your life at that time.
Yes, like many of us who come on this path, we've often been through our own challenges. And so for me, this was in the mid-90s. So I was studying as an undergrad. And at that time, the idea of neuroplasticity or brain retraining, that just wasn't on the agenda at all, right? So I had contracted some kind of virus or flu-like illness, a kind of stomach bug as well. And I kind of healed somewhat and I felt okay, but then suddenly rapidly went downhill and had essentially been diagnosed with ME or chronic fatigue syndrome. And as part of that, I had, aching joints and muscles. I couldn't focus and concentrate. So I had brain fog, cognitive difficulties. My whole system just felt like it was shut down. And I'd go from specialist to specialist, doctor to doctor, and they say, we don't know what you've got. We don't know what causes it. We have no treatment for it. And you might have it for the rest of your life. Right. Really almost like a death sentence for a young man. And I remember I'd met quite a lot of people with these conditions, and I'd made a contract with the universe that if I can just get myself even a little better, maybe 50% better, I will dedicate the rest of my life to help others with these conditions, because there's so much suffering that's going on with these kind of undiagnosed or unexplained syndromes that people have. And so I started studying a lot of brain neurology, a lot of physiology, and I came up with a hypothesis as to what might be causing my condition. And in an ad hoc way, I retrained my brain, which is obviously what we'll get into, and managed to get myself 100% better, and then set up a clinic to treat others, published medical papers, randomized controlled trials on both pain syndromes and neuroimmune conditions. And here we are. Yeah.
What made you go down that path? Because I think a lot of people would have said, like, well, let me go the supplement path, or let me go, functional treatment. Let me go deeper into pharmacology. Was there something in your past that made you think, like, maybe it's something more neuro-brain related that I'm dealing with, that other people are dealing with? Where did that initial spark come from?
Like many discoveries, for me, it was just serendipitous. I was in a bookstore, the days when we used to go to bookstores, and I saw this book on the shelf that just stood out to me. It was called The Emotional Life of the Brain by Professor Joseph Ledoux. And he is one of the foremost world's experts, or certainly at that time, on a brain structure called the amygdala and what they call fear networks in the brain. And he'd done a lot of research and animal studies. And that book, I don't know why, it just appealed to me. So I just read that book. And when I read that book, I realized he's not talking about my condition, but if I apply his hypothesis on fear responses and defensive responses to my illness, I can see that the similar pathways could be involved. And that's how my research started. That's how I actually got into understanding brain retraining, training myself. And then at that time, there was no such thing as, neuroplasticity was very early in its stages of development. And yeah, that's how we got to where we are today.
It's so interesting. So when I was in college, I had a crazy response to what we know now as a supplement. I was playing baseball. We're taking all kind of workout supplements, and one day I woke up and, like, my heart rate just would not shut down. I was, went from a resting heart rate of probably mid to upper 40s to like 95 to 110. And same thing, went through testing, did everything. And the doctor said, we think your heart got sick, is kind of the answer that they said. You got some sort of virus and we think it spread to your heart. I've studied a lot of medicine. That one hasn't crossed my path just yet. But I remember at the time kind of thinking what you just said, like, is this always going to be the case? Because it basically kind of derailed my career. I wasn't that good anyway, but and I remember feeling quite emotional about it. Like, you kind of go through these fear thoughts of, am I ever going to be normal? Am I ever going to be able to walk up steps without having to catch my breath again? All of that stuff that kind of starts to percolate and I see that with patients where the fear of it kind of almost becomes worse than what the actual condition is, the stress around it, the worry that you're not going to be normal. Do you think that book caught your attention because you were somewhat in that, like, I'm young, I'm dealing with this, the emotional life of the brain, like, you hear that and you're like, man, I don't know what that is, but I've had a lot of crazy emotions going on. I know certainly patients and stuff, I'm sure the people y'all are working with would agree with that.
Definitely. I think the word emotion jumped out at me, and I thought, I want to understand the science of emotion, because I know that in parallel to having this neuroimmune response, which is, all the physical symptoms, I also am fully aware and conscious that I'm feeling anxious as well at the same time. And I think what I really try to differentiate here is that, yes, there are emotions involved, but these types of illnesses are not obviously in the mind or emotional. But the very definition of an emotion, we have to shift and change. It is a defense response. So our emotions, as fear, anger, sadness, they're actually protective defensive responses from an evolutionary perspective. And in a similar way, so are our immune system and our nervous system. They're also defensive responses. And you might go to a doctor or a hospital, and in a hospital you'll have a separate immunology department and a separate physiology department and a separate psychology department, which is just not fit for purpose because our brains are not built like that. My research has shown that these different brain structures don't differentiate between emotional, biological, threats. Essentially, it's just there is a threat, and how do we ensure survival? For instance, so when you have flu, how do you feel emotionally? You feel down, depressed, don't want to do anything, lethargic. Why? That's deliberate, because your system says, when I'm triggering the immune system to fight off this virus, I want you to just lie down in your bed and do nothing, right? And so what we're saying is that defensive measures incorporate a whole package of defenses that include the emotional aspects.
Yeah, and I love that. Listening to some of the stuff and pulling research on this, that's something that we've talked about with young people a lot. Is like, I know in school we teach you the neuro, anatomy, the immunological, the orthopedic, all of these systems as separate. And I think that's just a learning thing. We need to come back and say, I know we said those were separate. They're not. They're all part of this, massive, intertwined, connective system. And you can't change one without changing the other. And one can't not function without affecting the other. And so as I've kind of dove into some of the brain chemistry, that one maybe even more important in terms of its effects on everything else. And I think we all know that, but we don't know what that means, maybe.
Well, I've done a lot of research into why is medicine set up in this particular way. And it's down to this Cartesian reductionist philosophy, which says that we can understand a system, like the body, when we go down to the smallest components, the base components. And that's where the problem is, and where we fix that. So if you look at a lot of medication, the drug companies, what they're doing is they're reducing it down to the smallest component. And if we shift that smallest component, then we can fix whatever is going on. And that's equivalent to our cars in the 80s and 90s, right? If something went wrong with your tire, you'd fix your tire. If something went wrong with the steering wheel, you'd fix the steering wheel. But actually, modern cars, what tends to go wrong is the electrical system, which connects everything. So you go take it to the garage, they plug your car in, they reset it, and all the electrical systems go back to normal. And in a similar way, our traditional medicine is very good at treating hardware problems. But a lot of modern illnesses are software problems, functional problems, where the actual electrical system is now misfiring and creating inappropriate responses. And so that's where brain retraining neuroplasticity is the real new exciting area of medicine, because it can treat so many illnesses that traditional medicine is not set up to treat.
Let's define a couple of areas of the brain just so people kind of understand as we dive into the neuroplasticity stuff. Can you kind of give us a little quick overview of kind of the sections of the brain and what they do in terms of health?
Of course, yes. And even myself, I have to be very careful that I don't get stuck in the reductionist philosophy of saying this is the little brain structure that is the cause of everything. So it's our overall brains that are involved in a coordinated defense in pain illnesses, long COVID, all these illnesses we'll talk about shortly, mold illness. It's a coordinated brain defense response. But I do believe there are certain structures where it's focused. And so the first structure is the amygdala, which many people may have heard of. So the amygdala, we've got two almond-shaped amygdalas that sit behind our eyes in the limbic system part of the brain. And its job is to recognize dangers. And as I said, traditionally that meant emotional dangers, a wild animal running towards us, and then trigger that fight, flight or freeze response. But we now know that the amygdala is also involved in pain networks and also in neuroimmune networks. So the immune system is also influenced by the amygdala. Yeah. So that's one structure, which is all about defending the body. The second structure is the insular part of the brain, which sits actually between the limbic system and the cortex. So some of this work we do has been named by other people as limbic retraining, but strictly that's not true. It's not limbic retraining. It's actually insular and amygdala retraining, we believe, in terms of the core areas that we are retraining. So the insular, its job is to take in all incoming information from the body. That could be, what is the immune system doing? What is the heart rate? What is the, pain signals. Taking all of that data, assess it, and create the appropriate immune, nervous system responses, hormonal responses that bring us to homeostasis and help us be essentially alive. Yeah. And these two structures are incredibly important because if we think about it, if we ask the biggest question, why are we here? Right? Now, we could spend the next half an hour talking about the philosophy of this, and I'd love to, but let's focus on the science. So we are here because over millions of years of evolution, our body has evolved to adapt to our environment, survive, procreate, and pass on our genes to the next generation. And our DNA, not many people know this, but our DNA contains a lot of the DNA of all the previous animals. So did you know this? Our DNA, we have 40% of the same DNA as a banana, which I find, really fascinating. So
right.
So kind of plant-based, plants and fauna, and then single-cell organisms, invertebrates, vertebrates, reptiles, mammals, we contain a lot of that DNA. So our amygdalas, our insulas, our brains, our nervous systems have learnt to adapt to our environment. So their number one priority is survival, especially the insula and the amygdala. And that gives us a clue as to why these illnesses proliferate, because the brain cares more about your survival than it does your well-being, essentially. So those are the two structures we focus on.
So when we get to brain retraining, neuroplasticity, what's happening there? Mm-hmm. I know we're going to talk into the how, but like what's going on to the physical structures inside? I think one of the reasons that some of this has been a little bit slower in the uptick is like in society, we kind of think that some of those activities are because we don't see it happening and we don't understand like what's going on inside. Our brain almost says like, I'd love your thought on why this has been slower than I think it should be. But our brain doesn't quite process it because we don't see the physical thing. And so we're like, I don't know, that's woo woo. And we kind of end up in that category. So what's going on whenever we're going through like a neuroplastic response, inside the physical structures of the brain and the nervous system?
Yeah, no, great question. And the reason this has happened is because the brain has been a black box, right? So we haven't been able to peer into the brain until very recently. And even when we take brain scans, actually those brain scans are very raw. We're not really understanding what the brain is doing. We're just getting a rough idea of, well, this is kind of doing this, or this is lighting up, and maybe it's doing this. So we don't really understand what's fully going on in the brain. And therefore, medicine is focused on what can be measured. So that reductionist philosophy. We can measure the body, we can measure the cells. But the brain, it's a black box. So let's just not necessarily include it in our thoughts, And I think that now we have to take a step back to the whole systems biology thinking that we are an integrated organism, and the nervous system and the brain coordinate everything. And that's where the issue lies, as lots of modern illnesses are based upon that. Now, when we come to brain retraining, what exactly is going on in the brain? So I'd love to go through the hypothesis, but let me just come back to the question you've asked. So in animal studies, especially by Professor Joseph Ledoux, what he's found is that when we are retraining the brain, there are actually projections from the prefrontal cortex that actually come down to the amygdala and the insula, and he calls them safety neurons. So we have the amygdala firing off going danger, danger, danger. And the prefrontal cortex is overwhelmed by that because there are more projections from our unconscious brain, our fear centers, that overwhelm our conscious mind. So as an example, the number one fear on the planet is public speaking. It's not death, it's actually public speaking. And so we've all had that moment, right, where we suddenly stand in front of an audience and the heart rate goes up and we're sweating and we're stressed out. And it doesn't matter what we do or say, that anxious response has overtaken us. So there are projections going from the amygdala, overwhelming our conscious mind, hijacking it. And brain retraining is when there are now new neurons that come from our conscious mind down to our amygdala, that when it fires off, it sends a safety signal to say, no, we are in safety. You can dampen down your responses. So imagine a wild horse. This wild horse is in panic. It's running around. And the equivalent of this is then the cowboy throwing his, is it a lasso? You call it a lasso? Yeah. Onto the horse to then capture it and calm it down, right? So in a similar way, that's what we believe is happening with these safety neurons. And in the amygdala itself, they talk about these brain structures called cell assemblies, where the brain now becomes very fixed in its response. So stimulus, interpretation, response. So the stimulus is pain, as an example. The interpretation is, this is wildly dangerous. We are in danger because of this pain. And the response is trigger peripheral and centralized sensitization, trigger inflammation, trigger neuroinflammation because we're in danger. Send the troops out, get this body saved. And that becomes a fixed network in the brain of stimulus, interpretation, response. And we need to now control that clump of cells.
Gotcha. Yeah, quite helpful. So whenever we talk about like brain retraining, if a lot of this response comes from like a safety response and that kind of heightens it, is that why the first step is to relax the nervous system? Like is that trying to tap into that safety neuron response first before we get to anything else?
Absolutely. So it's a bit like we talked about stimulus, interpretation, response. Now imagine that's like a river in a field, right? So there's a river flowing through a field and that's cut a little pathway. So that's like a neuron that's cut into our brain. And we need to reroute the river to a different stimulus, interpretation, response. And so we want to reroute the river on a different pathway. But that ground is frozen. Yep. There's no neuroplasticity there. And the more stressed and anxious we are, the less pliable our brain actually is. So the first response, and many people with pain, what is the first thing we do is try to relax ourselves, right? So breathing, meditation, body work, all of this attempts to loosen up the soil to make our brain more neuroplastic. So that's what we do as well. Our first step of our brain retraining is relaxing the nervous system, nervous system regulation. So that loosens up the soil. The second core step of our program is then retraining the brain, which is redirecting the flow of water from the left path to the right path. Different in stimulus, interpretation, response model. So the stimulus is pain. The interpretation is, this is no longer dangerous for us. It was in a past moment, but no longer now. And the response is a safety response or relaxation response.
And is this one of those situations where like you can't get to that part without relaxing the nervous system and making it more pliable? Like if people tried to skip to the like, oh, I don't want to do that stuff. I want to get to the core, and they tried to skip to, I want the meat of it. Let's do the hard work and do the retraining. It won't, you're doing it out of order, and the body in her infinite wisdom will not let that happen.
Like in medicine, there are no absolutes. So in most cases, you are absolutely right. But there are some cases where they have to skip to the retraining, because actually it's only when they do the retraining and dig the new pathway can the whole system actually calm down, because they are so anxious, so triggered, that actually any relaxation techniques tends to increase their triggered response. So that's in a minority of cases. But yes, in most cases, we get people to relax the nervous system first, then retrain the brain. And the third R of our program is re-engaging with joy. Now, this is often a neglected part of medicine, which is that actually, if we want to emphasize and reinforce safety neurons in the brain, we need to start feeling like I don't need to get rid of this illness before I'm allowed to be happy. And actually the brain, when it encounters joy or happiness or upliftment, and at the same time pain or negativity, it can't experience both of those two things at the same time, which is why learning to reconnect with what brings us small glimpses of joy and happiness and centeredness is also a part of reinforcing and not becoming complacent, reinforcing that safety response.
It's interesting. When I read that y'all put that in there, like re-engaging with joy, I was like, man, that is so brilliant, because I don't know if I ever hear doctors talking about that. Like, have you laughed today? I remember reading a story. I forget who it was. There was some celebrity who had, I want to say it was cancer, and he was talking about that he was doing laughter therapy. And I mean, this is like a decade ago. And this guy was like, yeah, like I watch comedy, like I have to watch an hour a day. I have to laugh for an hour a day. And he's like, look, I feel better now with this diagnosis than I've felt in decades. And you think about that and on some level, maybe we think that's superficial, But what you're saying is like, that's actually changing our brain chemistry. That's not a superficial, oh, you feel good because you have some happiness hormones. No, like your chemistry is different from some of that.
Oh, absolutely. So some latest research is showing that when we laugh, when we experience joy, at an epigenetic level, our gene expression is changing. Inflammation goes down when we laugh and sing and be joyous, right? So this is physical changes in the structure of the way the cells are responding. Yeah, and these are always things that science always catches up with. Like, we know that intuitively as a human being, right. But now we can measure these things. And so the reason this is an important component is because what happens is that pathway on the left-hand path that we covered over, it's still soft, right? And if we get into negative cycles, if we get into stress, which is why these illnesses come back, and they're often relapsing illnesses, is because, like, archaeologists, they can find a riverbed from 2 million years ago and they can still detect the riverbed. Those old pathways, neuronal pathways, are still present. They're still there. So re-engaging with joy is the opportunity to really reinforce that safety in the brain. And we prescribe that, and we have yoga, we have what they call laughter workshops. So every 2 weeks, our audience can attend within their package a laughter workshop. We have like hundreds of people who join. And it's literally someone who says, right, let's laugh and let's tell jokes and let's laugh out loud. And it's not so much about the workshop, but it's practicing the idea of deliberately laughing. Yeah. Just like a smile. When we smile, even a fake smile like that. Oh, that was pretty ugly. But anyway, even a fake smile can trigger the same responses in the brain as a real smile. And in a similar way, even a fake laugh, as you say, watch your favorite comedies. We've got access to so much great information now on YouTube. Just watch your favorite comedies, laugh out loud, and you'll feel great.
Yeah, even if you force it, right? I think that was one of the things that I was reading was, even if you fake the laugh for a little while, for the first few, literally fake it and just make it loud. And then at some point you'll start laughing at your fake laughing. And then it starts this weird kind of brain chemistry where your brain starts to help you get into that state more. And then that feeds into all these positive benefits. So this might be one of those where it's okay to fake it till you make it kind of situation.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And, it's the whole way the system works is that what we imagine, the brain can't tell the difference between what's imagined and what's real. So as an example, if I said to you, right, I've got a slice of lemon, really juicy, tangy lemon, and I'm going to place that juicy, tangy lemon on your tongue, but you don't bite into it yet, but you can just feel there's real sour juices on your tongue, and now you bite into that lemon, and now the saliva's going in your mouth, right? Now, did it work on you? Did you have any saliva there?
Yeah.
So, consciously that the lemon isn't real, but guess what? Your system still enacts the same physiological response as if it was real. So this is what we take advantage of. Yeah.
So let's go into the retraining part. Let's go into the meat of that. It sounds difficult, especially if I'd like to do this from the angle. I know we have about half the people who listen to this are practitioners, about half are patients. If we're talking to them and somebody is in the fibromyalgia, I've had persistent pain for quite a while. I do have some, anxiety. I've been diagnosed with A, B, or C. We could throw tons of diagnosis in there. I think to them, retraining their brain around that might seem like a daunting task. Mm-hmm. So what are the steps? I know y'all have some steps in there and we don't have to go through all of them, but I would love to know, what is the easiest place for somebody to start with that y'all find when people start, they're like, this one moved the needle a lot. And then kind of how do they piggyback on that? What are the steps to brain retraining?
Sure. So the first step is, we want people to understand the underlying hypothesis as to what is actually going on. Because if you don't understand that, then actually engaging with brain retraining won't work because you haven't primed yourself to even believe in it. So having a certain understanding and belief in it. So what this comes down to is, if we believe there is some kind of external organic cause to our pain that we can do nothing about, that is beyond our ability to change, then it can be difficult to retrain because you're trying to train your brain, but at the same time you're saying, oh, but this isn't going to work anyway, and this is the reason for my pain. Right. So it's recognizing that if you've been through all the tests, and obviously we don't tell people just to come to our program first. You need to have gone through the whole suite of tests with your doctor, get everything checked out. And if there's nothing further that they can do for you, then it's probably a software problem, not a hardware problem. That is the way we phrase it. And so really it's understanding the hypothesis at the first step. And can I just share a story with you that really helps people get to that first piece?
Love it. I'd love it.
Derek, I don't know, are you a Game of Thrones fan by any chance?
I am.
Yeah, there you go. So perhaps there are people listening who aren't, so you can just imagine a fairy tale, right? So just imagine a fairy tale. So imagine you are King Derek of a certain kingdom, okay? And your kingdom is your body, and you are the head of the body, you are the prefrontal cortex, you're the conscious, rational mind. And you have an army and a navy. So your army is your nervous system, your navy is your immune system. And they defend the kingdom against incoming invaders. Yeah. Now, in this scenario, let's imagine an invader is something that causes pain. Yeah. So an invader comes over the hill and your army and navy fire off their war machines and arrows to defend against whatever has caused this particular pain. And they fight off the incoming, whatever's causing the pain. Now let's imagine that there's a drought in the kingdom. So you're weaker. Physically, mentally, emotionally, in some state, it's some reason. And so now the army and navy have to work twice as hard to try and understand what is causing that pain and fight it off. But they eventually do, but they become traumatized by that battle. And they come to you, King Derek, and say, King Derek, we need all of the resources of the kingdom now. We need all the metal, the corn, the wheat. Everything needs to be channeled to us because guess what? We're in pain and the kingdom might fall if we don't deal with this effectively. So now what happens is all of the body's resources and energies are going to channel towards pain networks and pain defense networks. And guess what? As now, because the pain networks are highly sensitized, even a child walking over the hill, the brain thinks, oh, that could be dangerous. The army and navy then fire off their war machines again, defending it against innocuous stimuli. Then what happens is some of those arrows start falling back into the kingdom. Because now the army and navy are just firing off everything. So now the kingdom itself starts being affected by that inflammation and that neuroinflammation. Now, this is how the system then gets set up, where the original source of pain is no longer the problem. The problem is our response to the pain has got out of whack because survival is the number one priority. And our nervous system and immune system are now trigger happy, firing off those pain systems, making peripheral nerves sensitized, making centralized systems sensitized, and caught in this vicious cycle where we trigger the nervous system, immune system. That causes widespread inflammation in the body. That causes pain. That pain roots back to a hypervigilant brain. The brain says we're still in danger, triggers this response, and we get caught in a vicious cycle. And we're here to retrain that. So retraining is when your generals now come to the next meeting with King Derek. You say, hey, generals, you've done a fantastic job, but the war is over. You can now stand down. And neuroplasticity is you need to say that hundreds of times to train the brain out of that old conditioned response.
So initially, I love this. That makes sense. My brain was going all kind of places. I'm like, well, now all the fighters are going to be tired. So we need to like feed them more. So we need more of the farmers to be out there. They're going to be tired. Like the downstream effects of this is what happens inside of our body. So it's a fantastic analogy. So when people understand that, and I think anyone listening to this can hear that and say, I have been there. Whether it was pain, whether it was an illness, I think even, like especially I realized this during kind of COVID, probably more than anything else, where you would start to feel a little symptom and there was an immediate kind of fear response. And then you were like hyper focused on like, what do I feel? Am I having headaches? Man, do I feel achy? And like that constant energy towards how you were feeling. Am I getting sick? Am I coughing? Do I have fever? Like that wore you down more than if you were just like, I'll just wait and see, what comes of it. And I think the problem with that was there were so many people always in this fear. And if we're always there, that lowers our defenses. So it's more likely that we get whatever we were afraid of in the first place.
Yes. We do attract what we fear. So yes, it's one of those things that the irony of the immune system is that it's a very delicate system, right? And if we are anticipating being in the presence of something which could trigger us, then that constant stress actually compromises our immunity, which makes it more likely that we are going to catch the thing that we are concerned about. So actually, this emotional component, the stress component, is very important. But what I want to emphasize in brain retraining and neuroplasticity approaches, we are not saying that it's in the mind or we're just training emotions. What we're training is unconscious brain patterns that say we need to trigger defense responses. And that's a whole package of both the nervous system and the immune system together.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So if we're trying to train that, is that like, how are people doing that? Is that a suite of activities? Is that journaling? Is that, visual cues? What is in that suite of activities that they can do?
So it's very different to traditional cognitive and behavioral approaches. So the first R we talked about, so there's body work, breath work, meditation to try and calm the mind down. And if people find meditation very difficult, we have other relaxation techniques. So that's the first core of it. The second is, which our program, by the way, is delivered as interactive videos, which people watch and do exercises. So the second part of it is retraining the brain. So we teach people to recognize those danger signals at the periphery of consciousness. Because remember, this is all going on unconsciously. Often we're not aware of it. So we're becoming aware of an unconscious pattern. We tune into it, and then we're able to then enact a different response. And that is digging the right-hand channel in the brain that we talked about. So that response involves a specialized 7-step process to send that safety signal back to the amygdala and the insula. So that's the core of it. So it's repetitive techniques that people do throughout the day. Because as we said, if you're creating a new neuronal pathway, repetition is very, very important in a relaxed state. And the way we deliver this is we know that patients are often isolated, they feel alone. And so it's all delivered through an app and weekly webinars. So that makes it really easy to use, as well as the videos. But what's been a game changer that we just started a few months ago has been daily sessions on Zoom. So our coaches come onto Zoom every day, and whoever wants to come on, we do the nervous system regulation and the brain retraining every day, that people just come on live. And that has been such a godsend for most people, because they now feel like, wow, I don't need to think about this. I just come on at a certain time. Someone will look after me, take me through the training, and I'm taken care of. And that aspect, that bedside manner aspect of healing is so incredibly important. They say 40 to 50% of our healing is actually our relationship with the clinician, which I find so fascinating. Yeah.
I gave a talk on hospitality and healthcare, and one of the things we talk about is like this isn't like soft skills. This isn't woo-woo. Like, this will improve your patient outcomes dramatically if you improve their experience and their relationship with your office, with yourself, with your staff, with the environment around it. Like, this is not a small change. This is dramatic. If you're talking about a third of their healing, that is massive. That's somebody who's gone from an 8 out of a 10, before you even treated, to a 5 or 6 out of 10. That can be life changing. So I'm with it. I think that this is huge for a lot of people. I'm kind of pushing on this, and you don't have to give us any secrets, but what would people be doing during the day differently than they're doing now?
Sure. So there's this 7-step process that we've talked about, and there are shorter versions. When they recognize the signals, within those steps are things like awareness. Then there is some breath work within that. Then there is some self-coaching. Then there is some visualization. Then there's some decision making. So all of these components are there. And these are all taken from different areas of kind of therapy and whatever, but it's the unique recipe. So I think this is the unique thing. Like, it's baking a cake. You can have all the ingredients, but unless you've got the right sequence of steps, it's not actually going to work. So it's about that repetition of digging those new neural pathways and reinforcing the brain that you are no longer in that danger response or need to worry about this. And then there's another technique that we call the accelerator, which is a repetitive brain retraining process where you can sit down and repeatedly do this process. And that's been a game changer for many people. And then there's lifestyle changes as well. So we look at sleep, diet, anti-inflammatories, etc., that can all support the brain retraining. And then the second part of our program is we want people to get well and stay well. So we then help people look at their past traumas, but from a perspective of parts work, inner child work. And this is an optional part of the program, because we recognize that people who've had adverse childhood experiences, etc., are far more likely to get these types of illnesses than people who haven't. And we also have a hypothesis as to why that is. And therefore, recognizing our stress responses and dialing those down for the rest of our lives is incredibly important to stay well.
You kind of answered my next question, is like, is there brain retraining that we can do now while we're healthy that will prevent, or, we can't say prevent, but will massively lower our risk of ending up in a, chronic pain or chronic illness? Because we'd love to prevent them if we can. Is there some things that people should do to improve their kind of brain chemistry so that they lower that likelihood? Is it that last step? Like, hey, I don't have pain. I don't want to have pain. I know I've had, we all have past traumas and stuff like that. We all have things that have affected us throughout our lives. What would that look like? What if we were taking that step into prevention?
We call it the MEND protocol, MEND. Yeah. And with an S on the end, MEND's protocol. But it's the MEND protocol. So M is for mind. That's the most important, looking after our mind. So that's the daily cleansing of our mind. So every day we take a shower because we cleanse our physical body because it's accumulated dirt. Hey, guess what? Every day that you are thinking negative thoughts, worries, stresses, you're also accumulating dirt, some of which gets removed during sleep at night, but not all of it, especially if you've had a stressful day. So regular daily breathing and meditation is a must in our modern society, I believe, for everybody. Yep. So we prescribe that. E is for exercise. So we know that exercise has a real preventative healthcare effect on our brains and our bodies. So that's something we all know we should be doing. N is for nighttime. So that's our sleep, getting enough sleep, winding down before we get to sleep, sleeping at the same time, and all the good sleep hygiene we know about. And then D is for diet and supplements. And often people have it the other way around, where they focus just on that core diet and supplements and think that's the thing that's going to keep them healthy. No, diet and supplements can keep us healthy, but it's not the only thing. It's all of these things combined. And S is for social. How much are we engaging and socializing and having that upliftment through that, once again, connection and joy with others? And so these components are all very important in brain health, keeping us well, keeping us healthy, and preventing these types of illnesses occurring by reducing our overall stress levels. But number one, if you want a quick and easy thing, invest 20 minutes of your day, ideally in the mornings, with a meditation, with guided meditation, and give it a few weeks, because the first few weeks, you're just going to be sitting there and going, what the hell is this? I'm just worrying throughout this in 20 minutes. But give it time, run the gauntlet, and you will see the benefits coming into your life. And it's it's free. And Derek, I don't know if you know this, but there was a massive study done by Harvard in 2015, which should have been front page news around the world. It was a study on 15,000 people in a healthcare system and their usage of healthcare facilities. Then 4,000 of those 15,000 were taught daily meditation, deep relaxation, how to deeply relax your nervous system, and encouraged to do that once or twice a day. And they then measured healthcare utilization for the year afterwards. And they compared that to standardized normals. There was a 43% reduction in visits to a hospital or a doctor. 43%. And in their study, they said, we're all looking to see how can we reduce healthcare costs. This is quick, easy, cheap, doesn't require, and safe, and available to everybody. This is what should be an integral part of our healthcare systems. And yet that paper just got published and, no one knew anything about it. And we're really pushing it for this year to say, do you want to halve your visits to a doctor or a hospital? Massive clinical data on 18,000 people confirms this.
I think, if that was a peptide today, that would be on the cover of Yahoo and, CNN and, whatever other health thing. Amazing new peptide reduces. Maybe we need to kind of tweak the name of it so that it sounds a little more spicy.
Exactly. If it would be the miracle drug, it would be the biggest miracle drug ever created. And yet it already exists. But the difference is it requires that time.
Yeah. Yeah. We all like fast and easy, right? What are some of your favorite resources for people picking up meditation, learning meditation. Are there any kind of teachers that you like, any apps that you like? I know y'all put out a lot of resources on that, but are there some that you found really help people get going with it?
I mean, there's lots of great resources out there in terms of meditations. There's the YouTube. There's none that we specifically recommend apart from obviously our own. And our own are, the reason we've developed those is because they appeal to an anxious mind. So people who said they could never meditate, when they listen to our meditations, they get into the groove actually quite easily because of the way that we've structured it. So we have lots of free meditations on our app, and people can go there. I think we've got maybe about 20 meditations on there that people can experience, 10 and 20 minutes. Start with 10 minutes, move to 20 minutes. And
what's the app, Ashok?
So our app is called Gupta Program. GUPTA, guptaprogram.com. So you can either go to the website or go to the App Store and Play Store and search Gupta Program and start retraining your brain straight away.
I love it. I've used Tara Brach. Have you heard of her?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. She has some quite good, like in podcast form. And there was one that I just like for maybe a year, I almost listened to her, like it was like a 20-minute session, and I just did the same one every day, and I got something different out of it every single time.
Amazing.
So it's quite interesting. Whenever you go through that, your brain will figure out what it needs out of those things.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We all have our favorite teachers, our favorite meditations, and that's great because it's what appeals to us personally. And I think that the main thing is just to persevere. Yeah, it can be very easy to kind of let it go, but it's just doing it every day and just trusting that it's having massive benefits on your body. We
used to do float therapy. I don't know if you're familiar or if you've ever done sensory deprivation.
Yeah.
And it was like it was amazing for this because it just like you had no choice but to do it. And I think it was, I'm in South Louisiana, so I think we might have been a little bit early on the uptake, and this wasn't quite out there yet. But I hope that as this information goes, we can bring it back because it's one of those things you're like, everybody needs this. Exactly what you're talking about. Whether you're in, one of this like, these syndromes where it's just kind of constantly keeping you in this kind of pain response or this illness response, or you want to prevent it, either way, we need to be doing this stuff more, or at least consistently, right?
Oh, yes. I think it's fundamental. And even more in the last 20 years or last 15 years. The big thing that's changed our lives is mass social media on mobile phones. And if you look at the levels of anxiety and depression, they absolutely correlate with about 2011, 2012 onwards with when social media now proliferated on mobile phones. And therefore, we never had a break. Our nervous system never gets a break. So before 2010, if you're in a queue, you're just processing. You're in the default mode network. You're processing your emotions. You're releasing things. But now we never process our emotions because we distract our minds every moment with a screen. And therefore, meditation has become, in my view, absolutely compulsory to stay sane. How can you stay sane in the modern world if you're not having the downtime for your brain? And people say, oh, but I'm sleeping at night. Sleep is not the same because sleep is a different state of being versus conscious awareness and being still. And that training is fundamental, I think, in the modern world.
Yeah. I wanted to go back. What are some of we've talked about breathing a lot on here. What's some of your favorite breathing techniques? Can you teach us one of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are so many great breathing techniques. They sometimes call them, vagus nerve techniques and whatever. But ultimately, what they are all doing, I believe, is calming down the overall stimulation of the brain, especially the amygdala, which then outputs to the vagus nerve. So this idea that these are vagus nerve techniques, I think, is a bit of a misnomer. They're actually just calming the brain. And a technique that I really liked people to experience is what I call the acceptance technique. Yeah. So we can just try that now.
Yeah.
So if we just close our eyes and we take a slow, deep breath in from the stomach. Hold the breath for a few seconds and just breathe out slowly through the nose. And once again, breathing in slowly from the stomach. holding the breath and breathing out slowly and comfortably through the nose in a controlled way. Keeping our eyes closed, just breathing normally now. Notice any tension or tightness in your body. And just observe it like a curious observer. Maybe you have a resistance to your pain or another symptom you're experiencing in your body. Or maybe it's just a general feeling of resistance or tightness in your body. Or maybe there's something external you want to accept. So we're either accepting symptoms in our body or something else that we need to let go of. Set that intention of acceptance, accepting this thing, this symptom or this person. Let's take a deep breath in from the stomach. And now as you breathe out through your nose slowly, just say, and let go.
Let go.
Just allow your body into a place of acceptance. And imagine how your body would feel if you had already accepted this symptom or this person or situation. Let's do that again. Let's take a deep breath in from the stomach. Big smile on the face and let go and accept. Loosen your body, physically loosen your body. Just big smile, loosen your shoulders. Make your body like a rag doll. Just let go of all your muscles. And imagine what it would feel like to accept and let go. And one last time, let's take a deep breath in. With a smile, and let go and accept. Just notice that bit more feeling of looseness in your body. The muscles relaxing ever so much more. Breathing normally and just enjoying this feeling of acceptance. Just imagining what it would feel like to accept it all and let go. Let's take another deep breath in. And breathe out with a smile. Another energizing breath in, coming back into your body, back into the room. And breathing out with a smile. And when you're ready, you can just gently open your eyes. Feels different, right?
That's fantastic. That's great. I hope everybody listening to this, if you need to come back to that, come back to it. Don't do it while you're driving or something like that. But it's quite an interesting thing how much your body and your brain knows where to go with these little kind of cues. I think just let some of those kind of statements just rest on you, because whether it's like it's interesting. I have different things that come to mind when it's talking about acceptance. It's like, what do you need to accept? Is it an outcome? Is it an activity? Is it a person? Is it a problem? Is it a symptom? I think our brain and nervous system probably knows that response, even if we can't verbalize it.
Oh yes, our bodies know how to accept it. It's just saying, are you ready for me to do that? Our bodies and our brains are our servants. They want to support us. They love us. We've got to understand the right messaging and how to communicate with those parts of our bodies.
This is kind of a self-serving question. Do you like journaling? Do you recommend any of that stuff? I feel like there's a place for it in some of this stuff. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, on every video that people watch, there are some self-reflection questions that people can ask and write down answers, and just journaling and becoming aware of our emotional responses to our symptoms, our environment. We also encourage that as well. We call symptom patterns, writing down the patterns we're having. So all of that self-awareness is building through journaling, and that's an important part of the process for sure.
I love it. All of this kind of makes me think, like, is there a perfect treatment style that the practitioners need to kind of hear on this? Is like, this is often put in at the end of a treatment cycle where we've failed with other things. What's your response to that? Where should we put this type of treatment?
Well, we like to call ourselves complementary to what practitioners are already doing, whether they're medical or integrative and functional or nutritional. And therefore, some people bring this at the end of the treatment cycle. We encourage people to bring it in parallel because obviously supplement and diet changes can be incorporated relatively easily. But this investment of time in your nervous system and retraining works in parallel. Now, we have many practitioners who bring in our treatment at the beginning, right at the beginning, because they say, I know I'm not going to be able to give you medications or whatever because your nervous system is so sensitive. And what may happen is you give a patient a certain medication or supplement that then has some kind of reaction, which then sometimes requires another medication or supplement to offset that. And then because we are tweaking things, but not getting to often to the root cause. And so therefore we love to work with practitioners in parallel, and many practitioners are prescribing our program at the same time, which is really great to hear.
Yeah. That would be my thought, is like, there's probably some version of where I think about it, like, are there people that need this right away? And it'd be hard for me to describe exactly who that is, but I think I would recognize that in some of my patients that, look, this really needs to get started much earlier in the process for you, because there is such a kind of large central response. But I think for all of us to understand, like, this needs to be a part of it, because it's such a big part of our overall health, immune function, brain function, nervous function. It's hard for us to think about getting somebody physically healthy without them being the wiring that controls that being healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got to look after our software. Our software is in our power to actually control and manipulate and look after. Yeah.
As I thought would happen, Ashok, I've gotten through about 25% of my notes and questions that I had, but this is fantastic. I think listening to this, listen back, people, this can change your life 100%. If not, what else? What did we say? You can reduce your illness by 43%, or your chance of illness by 43%. That's exactly huge.
It's
where can people find? Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's a win-win regardless of these tools, whether you have a condition, don't have a condition, whether you think it's going to work, not going to work, it can benefit your life and be a game changer. And let's not rely on traditional medicine and medications to be the definition of health. I think that's the key. Yeah. That's
fantastic. Where can people find more about y'all, Ashok? You mentioned Gupta Group, the app, guptagroup.com. Can they follow y'all on any socials?
Yeah,
Gupta Program, sorry.
Gupta Program, yeah. So they can come to our website, guptaprogram.com, and sign up for our free trial. In the free trial, you get lots of free videos, lots of free audios, and then you can see whether the full program is right for you. And even our daily, what we call daily Gupta size, the first part of it, the nervous system regulation, is free to anyone at the moment. So you can join those daily Zoom calls for free and also get a step change in your health just through that. So that's a free gift that we're giving to everybody. And I think what's important, and that's guptaprogram.com, or once again, you can download the free app at searching Gupta Program on the App Store and Play Store.
And that's where they'll find the daily sign-ups?
Yes, exactly, the daily Gupta size. Great. And what we like to emphasize to people is, we can hear about lots of different treatments and think, well, is this really going to work? But we go very much down a science route. So we've got published randomized controlled trials. So for fibromyalgia and pain, we published a randomized controlled trial in the Journal of Clinical Medicine a couple of years ago. It was an independent trial. And they found that after just 8 weeks, our program reduced fibromyalgia scores by 40%, but 0% in the control group. Halving of anxiety, halving of depression, 50% increase in functional capacity, and halving of pain. And that was just an 8-week slot, whereas our program is at least a 3 to 6 month program. And we also did a recent study on long COVID, and it found that our program was 4 times more effective at reducing fatigue and exhaustion and increasing energy levels than, once again, a control group over 3 months. So we've now got these studies, and we're looking to do more and more studies. So it's the science-backed group is so important, so people have the belief and the sustainability with these tools.
Are these multi-site studies? Like, if there's doctors who'd want to be involved, should they reach out and connect with y'all?
Absolutely. So we're looking to enact lots of studies now around the world, multi-site, certain countries, and they can reach out to us if they would like to collaborate on studies. And in fact, we have a chronic research fund in the US, which is 501c compliant, so people can even donate to our fund to support this type of healing.
That's fantastic. This is such a great path. I really appreciate what you're doing and putting out in the world. Y'all are changing a lot of lives. This is something that I think so many people need, and a direction that even, the healthcare system needs to move into and understand more. So thanks for taking the time to do all of this stuff. I know that sometimes these things can be, the long-term work and time consuming and all of that stuff, but you're changing a lot of lives with putting this information out there. Thanks a lot, Ashok.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I do have to ask you our last question. So we ask all our guests, if people listening to this can do one thing to improve their health today, what would that one thing be?
People cheat by saying, well, there are 3 things. Well, they're included in one thing. But I would say, as I've mentioned earlier, take up a daily practice of deep nervous system relaxation. Yeah, that will help you in any aspect of your condition or what you're experiencing, and invest that time. If it's breathing, it's meditation, something like that can be incredibly powerful. So just start with that, take that up.
It's fantastic. Ashok, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Great information. This is fantastic. I've got tons of notes. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.